Welcome. This is Bhante Venrakita Samanera, also known as Brother Ben. So today we'll be continuing on with Chapter 2 of the Buddha's Technique and Practice of Counseling as depicted in the Pali Canon. It's an excellent resource by Jenny Kwek. This work was a thesis submitted to the Department of Philosophy at the University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka, for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, and it was published in 2007. So as usual, a quick disclaimer: I'm not claiming to be a high-level qualified mental health professional or a PhD doctor at all. I have a diploma which was attained at Singapore, a diploma in Buddhist psychotherapy and counseling. I also have a lot of experience from a 3-year ordination during which I sat through approximately 7,000 meditation interviews. That was in Wat Rampung, Chiang Mai, Thailand. I also have experience of traveling more than 160 temples across several countries in Asia during my now 11-year training as a Samanera. This ordination took place in March 2010, Kuala Lumpur, Buddhist Mahavihara Temple. So without further ado, let's go straight on into Chapter 2 of the Buddha's Technique and Practice of Counseling as depicted in the Pali Canon. So let's start off with a quick summary of the chapter. It's titled Psychology Underlying the Buddhist Technique of Counseling. Covers these subjects: the basic psychological tendency and its concomitants behind suffering, the 3 characteristics of existence, constituents of personality, how does perception affect judgment, creative factors of mental obsessions, hindrances, interpersonal relationships, physical and mental health, counseling for stress management, ways and means of appeasing psychosis, understanding the vicissitudes of life, purposive will. So these are the main categories and headings covered during this chapter. Chapter 2, Psychology Underlying the Buddhist Technique of Counseling, from the Dhammapada 43. Neither mother, father, nor any relative can do one greater good than one's own well-directed mind. In Pali, Natang mata pita kayira anye wa picha nyataka sama panihitang chitang sayaso nang tato kare. Any psychologist trained in Western psychology who happens to flip through the early Pali texts, he will come to the conclusive judgment that there are numerous references to his field of study in those texts. Certainly, typical psychological problems are often discussed and explained in the early Pali texts, and on that very infrastructure, Buddhist philosophy and ethics have been built. Buddhism has developed theories on psychological causality, perception, imagination and thinking, behavior, the process of consciousness and unconsciousness, motivation, emotions, different personality types, although rudimentary, a framework for psychosomatic disorders, the ways and means of changing the conscious process, and many more psychological issues. In early Buddhism, mutual relationship between philosophy and psychology became so close. In later times, as it seems, philosophy has superseded psychology in Buddhist studies. Lama Anagarika Govinda differentiates the attitude of the Buddhist philosophy and psychology from that of Kantian, and highlights how Buddhist psychology is different from purely scientific systems of psychology, which goes to the extent of losing the spiritual dimension. Writing on the psychological attitude of early Buddhist philosophy, he says, "The method of this psychology is comparable to that of a man who from a high mountain watchtower looks out over the landscape at his feet and now proceeds in regular order to extricate from the total picture of the landscape the distinguishing marks of his route and describe them in their corresponding order. His description lays no claim to be a description of the whole landscape, but only of those portions of the landscape which are of importance for his route. What he explains about the landscape is what is objectively given. It is the close intertwining of philosophy and psychology which protects Buddhism from stagnation." That note from Lama Anagarika Govinda in The Psychological Attitude of Early Buddhist Philosophy, pages 35 to 37. In fact, the Buddha discouraged speculative philosophy, which is termed as view, ditthi, and encouraged vision, dasana, from the Metta Sutta. Ditting cha anupagama dasanena sampanno, from the Sutta Nipata, pages 143 to 152. Evidently, Buddhist psychology is an empirical psychology. It analyzes the factors behind man's predicament. How can it be appeased for good? How does man behave? What are the forces of motivation? What laws determine his mental, physical, and verbal activities? How does ego illusion create an artificial center in his conscious life, leading him to conflict, misery, and rebirth? Early Buddhism focuses attention to the roles played by latent tendencies in the mind, even in small children, as well as the contributions of language, logic, and concepts for the creation of man's grief, sorrow, and suffering. The descriptive anatomy of the human mind and the defensive mechanism suggested in Buddhism is therefore a veritable source of information for any prospective counselor. The synopsis of the teachings that the Buddha taught in the following 45 years of his missionary career is given in the first sermon called Setting the Wheel of Law in Motion. Here he analyzes the present predicament of man, the cause of it, the appeasement, and the method to appease it. The Buddha's causal approach to the problem is like that of a physician who attends to an illness of a patient in relation to the etiology of a disease, or a counselor who counsels a client therapeutically after making an analysis of the causal situation. Man is experiencing unsatisfactory situations throughout his life, as given in the account of the First Noble Truth: birth, old age, disease, and finally death are suffering, dukkha, beginning from birth, excruciating gerontological and physical complications keep on annoying him, to be associated with the unpleasant, as well as to be separated from the pleasant, humiliate him. A note there. Pali word piyehi in the above context can be taken in the sense of animate or inanimate or both. In the sense of unpleasant as well as pleasant. Similarly, he is utterly frustrated when he does not achieve what he yearned for. The Buddha says that this entire unsatisfactory condition that pervades all along his life depends upon his narcissistic attitude to forms, feelings, perceptions, mental activities, and consciousness, which is technically called the fivefold mass of grasping, pancha upadana khandha. Freud's analysis of anxiety bears similarities to the Buddha's above diagnosis of suffering. Freud speaks of a phenomenon called separation anxiety, arising from a number of causes. Loss of the loved object, loss of the object's love, castration anxiety amounting to loss of the object of sensuous gratification, and the fear of the superego. Those notes from Standard Edition of the Complete Psychological Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 16, page 393. Padma Siri da Silva, who has done a special study on the Buddha and Freud, says that Freud's basic contention indicates that the concept of anxiety is a nodal point where important questions converge. Anxiety, under the influence of reality testing, follows mourning. That means follows grieving. Grieving as in loss. It is the result of the separation from the object of love. Since the object no longer exists, the bereaved person's attention is concentrated on it. Freud coined the word cathexis to denote this situation, which is the undesirable concentration of mental energy in one direction. The Freudian analysis affirms how exhaustive the Buddha's diagnosis of suffering is. Together with the above-mentioned specific psychological suffering, the Buddha integrated birth, decay, sickness, death, grief, lamentation, physical suffering, mental suffering, and despair into what he calls the whole mass of suffering, dukkha khandha. In Pali, jati, jara, vyadhi, marana, soka, parideva, dukkha, domanassa, upayasa. The Buddha often addressed the monks to lead them on their quest, and the teachings were preserved by monks and practiced mostly in monastic circles. The monks, as custodians of the teachings, built up their own particular tradition to enhance, establish, and clarify their objectives in view. In a wider connotation, interpretations found in the commentaries referring to early Buddhist concepts are confined mostly to fulfill those monastic objectives. Apparently, this emphasis has been laid on the religious aspect in exegesis of the early teachings, to the extent of neglecting perhaps some other aspects of the teachings. But when one reads between the lines and penetrates deeper into those concepts, one would discover a marvelous array of thought-provoking, psychological, psychoanalytical, and psychotherapeutic data original to early teachings of the Buddha. Basic psychological tendency and its concomitants behind suffering. Once the Buddha was addressing the monks and said that there are two kinds of disease, disease of the body and disease of the mind. In Pali, Dve me bhikkhave roga katame dve kayiko rogo cetasiko rogo. Anguttara, the Book of Twos, page 142, 143. The Buddha's concern about the physical health of his followers is summed up in the Besaja Khandaka of the Mahavagga. Referring to mental health, the Buddha remarked, "There are to be seen beings who can admit freedom from suffering from bodily disease for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, 4, 5, for 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 years. But monks, those beings are hard to find in the world, who can admit freedom from mental disease, even for 1 moment, save only those in whom the defilements have been destroyed." From Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Twos, page 143. What is the fundamental factor underlying this mass of suffering? It is craving, tanha. The Pali word tanha comes from the root tirsh, to be thirsty, and many English renderings for it have been suggested. Among them, desire, greed, attachment, love, affection, passion, thirst, and yearning are used according to the context where the word appears. Moreover, a number of other expressions also have been used to denote different shades of its import. Sensual desire, karma, desire, chanda, desire for sensual pleasure, kama chanda, love, pima, affection, sineha, delight, nandi, thirst, pipasa, consuming passion, parilaha, swoon, mucha, envy, issa, avarice, macharya are prominent among them. The term craving, tanha, is significant, both psychologically as well as philosophically, for the understanding of the Buddhist analysis of the human mind and its spiritual goal. As described in the discourse, craving has the inherent characteristic of leading one to re-becoming and having the pleasure of attachment and delighting in this and that, now here, now there. The note there. The text is Ya Yang Anha Pono Bhavika Nandiraga Sahagata Tatra Tatra Vinandani. Samyutta Nikaya 4, 421. In this particular context, J.G. Jennings suggests ever-recurring desire to the word pornobhavika in his long discussion. see the Vedantic Buddhism of the Buddha. Craving, coloured by the prolific tendency of the mind, is instrumental in causing conflict and confrontations found in the world over. The Buddha describes how craving contributes to bodily and mental suffering thus. When one abides inflamed by lust, fettered, infatuated, contemplating gratification, then 5 aggregates affected by clinging are built up for oneself in the future, and one's craving gives rise to renewed existences. One's bodily and mental troubles increase. One's bodily and mental fevers increase. And one experiences bodily and mental suffering. The note there, Salayatana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 3, page 287. See also Chachaka Sutta. Basically, desire is threefold. 1. The desire for the gratifying one's senses, including sexual urge, is called desire for sensual pleasure, kama tanha. 2. The motivation by other egoistic impulses, such as to possess, to hoard, for power and fame, and also to be born again and again in pursuit of happiness, is called desire for becoming, bhava tanha. 3. The tendency to eliminate, get rid of what we dislike is the aggressive mental trait known as desire for annihilation, vibhava tanha. As craving is a root condition, 9 other subsequent conditions that are rooted in craving also appear one after the other. 1. Pursuit, pariyesana. 2. Gain, labho. 3. Decision, vinichayo. 4. Desire and attachment, chandarago. 5. Tenacity, ajosana. It's clinging on tightly to something. 6. Possession, parigaha. 7. Avarice, macharya. 8. Guarding, araka dikaranam. 9. Diverse evil states of fighting, punching, wounds, strife, contradiction, retort, quarrel, slander, and lies. Dandana, satadana, kalaha, vigaha vivada, tuvang tuva pesunya, musawada, aneka papaka, akusala dhamma sambhavanti. The note that comes from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours, page 400 to 401. The dynamic nature of craving is explicitly explained as 108-fold in relation to the 6 senses: one's eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The 6 sense objects, external objects of form, sound, smell, taste, contact, and concepts of the past, of the present, and of the future, multiplied by the 3 kinds of craving. So that's 6 senses plus 6 sense objects, that equals 12. 6 plus 6 times 3, past, present, future, that equals 36. 6 plus 6 equals 12 times 3 equals 36. Times 3. 3 kinds of craving. That equals 108. The concept of sensuousness, karma, is twofold by way of subjective sensuality, kilesa karma, and objective sensuality, vatu karma. Subjective sensuality, or sense desire, is directed to all 5 sense objects. Objective sensuality is referred to as chords of sensuality, kama guna. There are 5 chords of sensuality: the visible objects, cognizable by the eye consciousness, that are desirable, cherished, pleasant, lovely, sensuous, and alluring. In the same way, sounds, smells, tastes, and physical contacts that are all desirable, cherished, pleasant, lovely, sensual, and alluring are stated. Bhikkhuni Dhammadina maintains that the origin of personality is craving for sensual pleasure, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of personality by the Blessed One. The note there from Chula Vedala Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 299. See also the Samaditi Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 48. The views of eternalism and nihilism are instrumental in the desire for becoming and desire for annihilation, respectively. Personality belief as a speculative opinion plays a prominent role in driving these threefold desires to the surface. The note there, that's from the Brahmajala Sutta, Digha Nikaya 1, page 46. The Buddha outlines 55 eternalistic views and 7 nihilistic views. The Bhikkhuni continues to describe 20 types of personality beliefs. The note there from the Chula Vedala Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 299. One may wonder how desire for annihilation has any relationship to personality belief. Venerable Ñāṇatiloka explains it precisely. Numerous speculative opinions and theories, which at all times have influenced and still are influencing mankind, are quoted in the sutta texts. Amongst them, however, the wrong view which everywhere and at all times has most misled and deluded mankind is the personality belief, the ego illusion. This personality belief, Sakkaya Ditthi, or ego illusion, Atta Ditthi, is of 2 kinds: eternity belief and annihilation belief. Eternity belief, Sassata Ditthi, is the belief in the existence of a persisting ego entity, soul, or personality, existing independently of those physical and mental processes that constitute life and continuing even after death. Annihilation belief, Ucceda Ditthi, on the other hand, is the belief in the existence of an ego entity or personality as being more or less identical with those physical and mental processes, and which therefore, at the dissolution at death, will come to be annihilated. From Venerable Ñāṇatiloka, Buddhist Dictionary, page 61 and 62, the Buddha says that the 3 roots of evil that feed those desires are lying latent in a deep recess in the mind, together with some other accompanying proclivities, inclinations, or tendencies. The note, These three roots of evil are often referred to as lobha, dosa, and moha. Altogether, there are 7 such latent tendencies, the anusaya. 1. Sensuous desire, kama raga. 2. Grudge or hatred, patiga. 3. Speculative opinion, ditthi. 4. Skeptical doubt, vichikicha. 5. Conceit, mana. 6. Craving for continued existence, bhava. And 7. Ignorance, avidya. The note there from Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Sevens, page 11 and 12. 1, 2, and 7, that is sensuous desire, kama raga, 2, grudge or hatred, patiga, and 7, ignorance, avijja, correspond to the often mentioned 3 roots of evil. According to the Visuddhimagga, these tendencies are called anusaya because in consequence of their pertinacity, they ever and again tend to become the conditions for the arising of new sensuous greed. The note, that's from Visuddhimagga 22, page 60. These underlying tendencies generate the 3 categories of desire, one way or another. In the Anguttara Nikaya, there is a description that refers to thought reading. It states how a yogi is capable of reading the mind of another and predicting what the person would think the next moment. This is an indirect reference to the working of latent tendencies, from Anguttara Nikaya 1, page 171. These tendencies or emotions manifest in successive stages known as latent level, anusaya, conscious level, pariyutthana, and overt level, vitikama. And that comes from Anguttara Nikaya 1, page 44. Visuddhimagga 5. On the latent level, these negative emotions lurk deep within the human psyche and keep on gestating and sending negative vibration to the conscious stage. On the conscious level, they are manifested at the surface, but still do not find expression through words and deeds. A person may restrain himself from venting it through any physical or verbal act. On the overt level, they burst forth and manifest through violent verbal and physical behavior. Johansen also draws our attention to the fact by commenting on a passage in the Majjhima Nikaya. According to the Buddhist doctrine, feeling is closely related to the experience of the environment. All impressions that reach our senses are evaluated. Therefore, feelings cannot be avoided. But our text says that they easily give rise to emotional reactions like desire and repulsion, and these have to be checked by the Buddhist. The anusaya is frequently used in a sense that reminds of the psychoanalytical concept of the unconscious drives. The note from Rune E. A. Johansen, Pali Buddhist Texts, page 39. He quotes an answer given by the nun Dhammadina to a question asked by Visakha in the Chula Vedala Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 301. The ideational process described in the Buddhist texts with reference to latent tendencies that surface from time to time led Jayatileke to say that early Buddhism has accepted the unconscious mind. Jaya Surya, as well as De Silva, also have remarked that the word anusaya is suggestive of psychoanalytic concepts of the unconscious mind. The note there from Jaya Surya in The Psychology and Philosophy of Buddhism, page 108, and from Padmasiri De Silva, Buddhist and Freudian Psychology, page 61. Therefore, according to Buddhism, a man's stream of consciousness has two components: conscious and unconscious. His conscious activities get into this unconscious and are being stored there, continuing to influence his conscious behavior. On this basis, Johansson further remarks that neutral feelings easily become ignored, i.e. unconscious, but this type of feelings are the most useful and should be kept conscious. From Rune E.A. Johansson in Pali Buddhist texts, page 39. The Buddha relates an incident to show how latent tendencies surface under external provocation. A good report has spread of a mistress called Vedehika in Savatthi, that she was kind, gentle and peaceful. She had a maid called Kali, who was clever, nimble and neat in her work. One day Kali thought that she should find out whether the good report about the mistress was actually true, and whether anger was present or absent in her, or because she was competent in her work that the lady was showing no anger. So the maid got up late one day. Vedehika said to her, "Hey Kali, what is it, madam? What is the matter that you got up so late?" "Nothing, madam." "Nothing, you wicked girl? Yet you get up so late?" The mistress was angry and displeased, and she scowled. The maid Kali wanted to test her further, and on the following day she woke up even later. The mistress scolded her more harshly than the day before. On the third day she awoke still later in the day. The mistress scolded her thoroughly and gave her a blow on the head with a rolling pin and cut her head. Then the maid, with blood streaming from her head, denounced her mistress to the neighbours, saying that the mistress was violent, merciless, and she hit her head with a rolling pin. The Buddha related this episode to show that there are some who are extremely kind, extremely gentle, extremely peaceful, so long as nothing disagreeable irritates them. Just as a man who cuts off the weeds that choked a sala tree and cuts down the crooked sapling that robbed the sap, cleans up the interior of the grove and tends the straight, well-formed saplings, so that the tree could grow without obstruction. Even so, one has to abandon unwholesome states of the mind for the development of the wholesome states. And that is from Kakachupama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 124 to 126. Mark Epstein groups the three types of craving into two, whereby combining the last two together illustrates how it can be viewed as psychodynamic thought and narcissism. The Buddha describes two types of craving, each of which has a counterpart in psychodynamic thought. The first, the craving for sense pleasure, we can grasp immediately. The second, what the Buddha called the craving for existence and non-existence, is what we would today call narcissistic craving. The first for a fixed image of self as either something or as nothing. It is the craving for security wherever it can be found, in becoming or in death. That note from Mark Epstein, Thoughts Without a Thinker, page 59. Jaya Tileke explains the concept of desire together with a comparison from Freudian analysis. Man is motivated to act out of greed, which consists of the desire to gratify our senses and sex. Kama tanha, comparable with the libido of Freud, as well as desire to gratify our egoistic impulses. Bhava tanha, comparable with the ego instincts and superego of Freud. He is also motivated to act out of hatred, which consists of the desire to destroy or eliminate what we dislike. Vibhava tanha, comparable with the thanatos or death instinct of Freud, and also out of erroneous beliefs. The note that comes from K.N. Jayatileke in The Message of the Buddha, page 34. Strikingly, Schopenhauer's threefold classification of the will, or unquenchable thirst, also has a similarity to the Buddhist concept of desire. According to him, the will to live is A. Sexuality, B. Self-preservation, and C. Suicide. He goes on to illustrate how most of man's desires remain unfulfilled. The will often remains not satisfied, hence all the suffering. Three characteristics of existence. The three characteristics of existence, namely impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and non-substantiality, anatta, are the three cornerstones of the whole edifice of Buddhism. Since they are the three universal properties of all things existing in the phenomenal world, it is legitimate to say that it is the world view of Buddhism. The interrelationship of the three concepts is explained often in Buddhist discourses. The second discourse delivered by the Buddha brings out clearly how they are interconnected and why one should not entertain the thoughts of "this is mine," etang mama, "this is I am," eso hamasmi, "this is myself," eso me atta. The classical expression of this teaching is found in the formula "all conditioned things are transient or impermanent." Sabbe sankhara anicca. Whatever is impermanent is unsatisfactory. Yada nityang tang dukkhang. Whatever is unsatisfactory is non-substantial. Yang dukkhang tada natta. From Samyutta Nikaya 3, page 22-23. Vijayasekara, in his writing on these three characteristics, has shown how the Buddha's conclusion with regard to man's nature is in perfect agreement with his general concept of impermanence. From the three Sinyata, page 4, OH-A, Vijayasekara. Although impermanence is a fact that is being experienced objectively as well as subjectively, some of those who refuse or are unable to accept it may experience psychological disorders. The authors of Buddhism for Dummies explain this fact in a most tangible way. As Buddha repeatedly pointed out, nothing you perceive through your five senses remains the same from one moment to the next. As we discussed in chapter 2, unless that has changed too, everything is constantly changing. The real problem isn't that things appear to be permanent. but you buy into this false appearance and mistake it for reality. Then, when things begin to fall apart, you experience unnecessary grief and anxiety. The solution is simple. Repeatedly mind yourself of the truth of impermanence. Especially catch yourself admiring possessions as if it'll last forever. That note from Buddhism for Dummies, page 316, by Stefan Bodan and Jonathan Landau. Constituents of personality. According to Buddhist analysis, man is a psychophysical unit constituted of mental factors and physical form, nama, rupa. Again, these two factors are analyzed into 5. Physical form, rupa, feeling, vedana, perception, sanya, mental formations, sankhara, and consciousness, vijnana. Thus, the personality is a pack of these 5 factors having no any abiding substantiality whatsoever, particularly the 3 terms, perception, mental formation, and consciousness, occurring in this analysis are significant for our understanding of the Buddhist view of psychodynamics for effective counseling. Perception is bound to consciousness inseparably and 6-fold in regard to the 6 respective sense objects, i.e., forms, sounds, smells, tastes, physical contacts, and thoughts. How does perception influence judgment? Perception plays a major role in our behavior. The way we perceive the world around us at any given moment conditions our thoughts to our disadvantage or to our benefit. Therefore, Buddhist psychology pays special attention to perception in its analysis of perceived data and their subsequent evaluation. Emotion is the interpretation and expression that we give to our mental states aroused through perception. In early Buddhism, as well as in the Abhidhamma, these emotions are discussed in detail. Different contexts, different classifications have been given to facilitate understanding. With reference to how perception affects our judgment, Buddhism has a clear psychoanalytical answer, as explained in the Madhu Pindika Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. It says, and this is from Madhu Pindika Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 111. Visual consciousness, brethren, arises because of eye and material shapes. The meeting of the 3 is sensory impingement. Because of sensory impingement arises feeling. What one feels, one perceives. What one perceives, one reasons about. Vitaketi. What one reasons about, one proliferates. Papanjeti. What one proliferates, due to that papanja, sanya, sakha, assail him in regard to material shapes, cognizable by the eye, belonging to the past, the future, and the present. In the same way, perceptual process of other sense faculties are explained. And brethren, auditory consciousness arises because of ear and sound. Olfactory consciousness arises because of nose and smell. Gustatory consciousness arises because of tone and taste. Bodily consciousness arises because of body and contact. Mental consciousness arises because of mind-mental objects belonging to the past, the future, and the present. The process of perception, as illustrated in the discourse, is of immense importance to understanding the Buddhist approach to positive and negative emotions. The process from perception up to reasoning there is deliberate activity, but with the proliferation or differentiation, the subject becomes the object because of obsessive thought formations, colored with concepts and linguistic conventions. For example, he made me angry instead of I am angry. In other words, the perceiver's contribution to craving, tanha, conceit, mana, and view, ditthi, and other latent tendencies or dispositions in the process makes him a hapless object of what he perceived. Bhikkhu Jnanananda, in his analysis of Papanja, says, like the legendary resurrected tiger who devoured the magician, who restored it to life out of its skeletal bones. The concepts and linguistic conventions overwhelm the worldling who evolved them. At the final and crucial stage of sense perception, the concepts are, as it were, invested with an objective character. This phenomena is brought about mainly by certain peculiarities inherent in the linguistic medium. As a symbolical medium, language has an essential public quality about it. This public quality has necessitated the standardization of the symbols, words, as well as of the patterns of their arrangement, grammar, and logic. And these, therefore, enjoy a certain degree of stability. Now, the vague percepts, which are already tainted with a notion of stability owing to the limitations of the sensory apparatus, becomes fully crystallized into concepts in the realm of ideation. And that note from Concepts and Reality, page 6 to 7, by Jnanananda Bhikkhu. In this connection, it is interesting to note that once the Buddha described 3 types of activities, sankhara, and classified them as bodily activity, vocal activity, and mental activity, and defined them as exhalation and inhalation are bodily activity, kaya sankhara. Reasoning and investigation are vocal activity, vaci sankhara, and perception and feeling are mental activity, mano sankhara. That's from Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 301. The way that the conventions of language enter into the arena of sense perception is a significant event. It is this linguistic convention that introduces subject and object duality, interrupting objective evaluation of data to the extent of registering in the mind, I like this, I hate that, or it made me feel helpless. A thought came to me. When one is not in touch with one's emotions or does not take ownership of or responsibility for one's feelings. How semantic and syntactic information manipulate our thought construction and resultant papancha is quite clear from the above definition. Rune E.A. Johansson has given the following comment on this Buddhist definition. It is remarkable that thought processes are called an activity of the speech. Dr. Watson, the well-known behaviorist psychologist, tried to introduce the same idea. Perhaps it was believed that thought processes were always presented psychologically in the form of verbal ideas. From text number 38, which uses the same words for thought processes, it is anyhow clear that spoken words are not intended. The note there, that is from Rune E.A. Johansson, Pali Buddhist Texts, page 43. The text number 30 reference mentioned here is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives, page 205. In other words, we are motivated by the feelings that are conditioned by perception. Underlying are latent tendencies or dispositions, which are dormant until they are stimulated by perceptual process. According to the Buddha, there are many things in our nervous system which are not conscious, but they may influence our behavior and our mental state. On one occasion, when the Buddha was going for alms, Bahiya followed him and begged to be taught something for his profit and happiness. Twice he asked, and twice the Buddha refused, saying that it was not the hour for teaching. However, Bahiya insisted, saying that life was uncertain and that the Buddha or he might die. Buddha then taught him the proper method of regarding all sense experiences, saying, "Then Bahiya, thus must you train yourself. In the seen, there will be just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the imagined, just the imagined. In the cognized, just the cognized. Thus you will have no thereby." That is how you must train yourself. Now Bahiya, when in the seen, there will be to you just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the imagined, just the imagined. In the cognized, just the cognized. Then Bahiya, as you will have no thereby, you will have no therein. It follows that you will have no here or beyond or midway between. That is just the end of ill. So here is the Pali. Tasmatiha te Bahiya Ewang Sikita Bang Dite Dita Matang Bhavisati Sute Sutamatang Bhavisati Mute Mutamatang Bhavisati Vinyate Vinyatamatang Bhavisatiti Ewang hite Bahiya Sikita Bang Yato ko te Bahiya Dite Ditamatang Bhavisati Vinyate Vinyatamatang Bhavisati Tato tuang Bahiya na tata Yato tuang Bahiya newata Tato tuang Bahiya newida na hurang na ubaya mantarena es evanto dukasati. Udana, page 8. Creative factors of mental obsessions, hindrances. There are 5 factors causing mental obsessions that are usually translated as hindrances or impediments, nivarana. This is a fairly comprehensive treatment of negative emotions that keep one's vision obscured. They hamper one's discerning ability and impair one's judgmental potentiality. Namely, they are 1. Sensuous desire, kama chanda, the will or attention or intention that feeds sensuous feelings, the first of the 3 roots of evil. 2. Ill will, vyapada, hatred or aversion that arises due to unwise attention to objects, causing aversion, the second of the 3 roots of evil. 3. Sloth and torpor, tina midda, listlessness, lassitude, or drowsiness of the body and mental sluggishness, arising due to lack of energy and element of exertion. They may or may not be associated with the greedy consciousness. 4. Restless and remorse, or scruples, udacha, kukucha. Restlessness is a mental factor inseparably associated with all unwholesome consciousness. Remorse arises due to one's wrong way of performing an action. Kukritya, wrong performedness. It is described as repentance over wrong things done and right things neglected. It causes distraction. Whenever it arises with hateful consciousness. 5. Skeptical doubt, vichikicha. Other than its religious implication, it also applies to uncertainty or suspicion as to whether things are good or bad, to be performed or not to be performed, of high value or low value. It is described as lack of desire to think, vigata, chikicha, desiderative from the root chit, to think. That comes from the Visuddhimagga 14.177. Its manifestation is indecision and a divided attitude. It is rooted in delusion, and its proximate cause is unwise attention to matters of doubt. The note there from Venerable Nyanaponika Thera, The 5 Mental Hindrances, The Wheel, publication number 26. And you can also see Buddhist Dictionary on Hindrances. In many places of the canonical texts, these factors are analyzed, annotated, and elucidated to illustrate the importance of eliminating them for the attainment of the goal of religious life. They jeopardize, as it were, the mental poise of an individual and make him obsessive. They being psychological factors that tend to overwhelm a client with despair, stress, depression, or perversion. A counselor can make use of them to assess the client's mental condition and counsel him effectively. These factors are described with beautiful similes, which are tangible, visual imageries that interpret the impact of psychological aberrations that are caused by them. Sensual desire is compared to water mixed with red, yellow, or orange color. Ill will is like boiling water. Sloth and torpor are like water covered with moss and water plants. Restlessness and remorse are like water stirred by the wind, agitated and producing waves. Skeptical doubt is compared to water stirred up and muddy. A person with a normal faculty of sight would not be able to see the reflection of their face in the water in any of these instances. In the same way, when a person is obsessed by these factors, he does not see the way out of them, nor what is good and bad for him and for others. The texts that he has mastered would not come to his mind, not to speak of those he has not mastered. And the note there from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives, page 193. As long as one is under the sway of these hindrances, one feels as if in debt, in sickness, in bonds, in slavery, or on a desert journey. Freedom from these negative emotions or mental hindrances brings peace, comfort, and consolation. In illustration of the fact, 5 alluring similes, antithetical to above 5 situations, are also given. 1. Just as a man who had taken a loan, developed his business, and whose business had prospered, might pay off his old debts, and with what was left over, could support a wife. 2. Just as a man who was ill, suffering, terribly sick, with no appetite, and weak in body, might after a time recover and regained his appetite and bodily strength. 3. Just as a man might be bound in prison, and after a time he might be released from his bonds without any loss, with no deductions from his possessions. 4. Just as a man might be a slave, not be his own master, dependent on another, unable to go where he liked, and after some time he might be freed from slavery, able to go where he liked. 5. Just as a man, laden with goods and wealth, might go on a long journey through the desert, where food was scarce and danger abounded, and after a time he would get through the desert and arrive safe and sound. And that's from the Samanya Pala Sutta, Digha Nikaya 1, page 73-74. Page 100. In his description, Nisanka, 3 factors with reference to Buddhist techniques of meditation. From H.S.S. Nisanka, Buddhist Psychotherapy. Since many books have been written on Buddhist meditation, we do not intend to examine the feasibility of meditation here. As traditionally described, there are 5 ways of overcoming or abandoning pahana, them. They are relevant from the counseling point of view, and a counselor can make use of them according to his requirement. 1. Overcoming by repression, vikambana pahana. It is temporary suspension by pushing aside adverse mental tendencies, through this or that mental concentration. Just as a pot thrown into moss-clad water pushes the moss aside. 2. Overcoming by the opposites, tadanga pahana. It is by practicing this or that factor of knowledge belonging to insight, just as lighting a lamp to dispel the darkness of the night. 3. Overcoming by destruction, samucheda pahana. It is by resorting to the noble path until the evil tendencies are fully destroyed, just as a tree destroyed by lightning. 4. Overcoming by tranquilization, patipassadi pahana. development of the path to the point of tranquilizing the evil tendencies. And 5, overcoming by escape, Nissarana, Pahana, extinction of all evil by realizing Nibbana. The note there, see Buddhist dictionary on Pahana and also Visuddhimagga, page 110, 34, 47, 78, etc. Interpersonal relationship, physical and mental health. Man is an extraordinarily complex being among all species on our planet. He is the most intelligent and adaptable being ever lived on the earth. He is a social animal, and his human nature is developed with social living and interaction with society. Beginning from early childhood, it is society that feeds him psychologically as well as physically in many respects. In our scientific and technological age, society and work situations exert pressure on individuals to become individualistic and yet be cooperative. They have to master and become skillful in their trade, for which they need a higher percentage of self-reliance and self-development. Besides, man is required to be cooperative, and being team-conscious should be able to maintain good interpersonal relationship. Paradoxically, under this circumstance, he is able to contribute to society for its progress, or he may be contributing to its downfall. Although human being is a social animal from his birth to death, practically he leads a lonely life in a self-created world. Each one of us has a different perspective of life. One's values, likes and dislikes, obsessions, sense of guilt, and prejudices depend upon one's perspective, thereby making the interpersonal relationships complex and enigmatic. This is a fact accepted by the Buddha as well. What one considers as trivial may be highly valued by another. Because of this reason, conflicts and confrontations inevitably occur. Therefore, in order to strengthen the interpersonal relationship for the sake of the well-being of individual and society, the Buddha has prescribed several procedures to be followed. Out of them, 2 important teachings called 4 Sublime Abodes, Brahma Vihara, and the 4 Ways of Showing Favor, Sanghavatuni, can be cited. They address specially to the mentality of clients suffering from worry, depression, and poor interpersonal relationship. And also they can be used effectively to counsel psychotic and neurotic clients. Clients who cherish negative thoughts and emotions become the victims of their own unwholesome thoughts. Because of the constant occurrence of negative thoughts, which sink into their subconscious minds, they are subjected to psychic trauma and thus causing difficulties in interpersonal relations. The final outcome is career failure. 4 sublime abodes are: 1. Loving kindness, metta; 2. Compassion, karuna; 3. Sympathetic or altruistic joy, mudita; and 4. Equanimity, upekkha. The note from Digha Nikaya 3, page 223. Acharya Buddhaghosa discusses in detail the method of applying the above and the positive benefits of practicing them in chapter 9 of the Visuddhimagga. A counsellor can prescribe one of these subjects to his clients having aforementioned psychological problems. Loving kindness is the unconditional love towards all sentient beings, as discussed in one of the popular discourses in the Buddhist scriptures, the Metta Sutta, Suttanipata 143-52. One has to start firstly with pervading thoughts of loving kindness to oneself, and then proceed further step by step to engulf all living beings. It is argued that one who cannot be kind to oneself cannot bestow kindness on others. The note. Describing this at length, Acharya Buddhaghosa quotes the Buddha, "I visited all quarters with my mind, nor found I any dear than myself. Self is likewise to every other dear. Who loves himself will never harm another." Samyutta Nikaya 1, page 75. Benevolence to oneself is part of the healing process in counseling. In another context, 11 benefits of cultivating loving kindness are given. It is interesting to note that 10 out of 11 benefits enumerated are concerned with one's day-to-day life. 1. Comfortable sleep. 2. Waking up comfortably. 3. Freedom from dreadful dreams. 4. Becoming affectionate to human beings. 5. Become affectionate to non-human beings. 6. Protection by gods. 7. Not being subjected to fire, poison, or weapons. 8. Mind becomes composed. 9. Facial complexion becomes bright. And 10. Able to face death with dignity. 11. Birth in the Brahma world after death if arahantship is not attained. That is from the Metta Nisangsa Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, page 342. In accordance to the client's problem, any one factor out of the 4 can be used to devise practical strategies to bring about an attitudinal change in the client's perspective. The exegesis of the 4 are thus given in the Visuddhimagga. Loving kindness is characterized here as promoting the aspect of welfare. Its function is to prepare welfare. It is manifested as the removal of annoyance. Its proximate cause is seeing lovableness in beings. It succeeds when it makes ill will subside, and it fails when it produces selfish affection. Compassion is characterized as promoting the aspect of allaying suffering. Its function resides in not bearing others' suffering. It is manifested as non-cruelty. Its proximate cause is seeing helplessness in those overwhelmed by suffering. It succeeds when it makes cruelty subside, and it fails when it produces sorrow. Sympathetic joy is characterized as gladdening, produced by others' success. Its function resides in being unenvious. It is manifested as the elimination of aversion, boredom. Its proximate cause is seeing beings' success. It succeeds when it makes aversion, boredom, subside, and it fails when it just produces merriment. Equanimity is characterized as promoting the aspect of neutrality towards beings. Its function is to see equality in beings. It is manifested as quieting of resentment and approval. Its proximate cause is seeing ownership of deeds, karma, thus. Beings are owners of their deeds. Whose, if not theirs, is the choice by which they will become happy? Or will they get free from suffering? Or will not fall away from the success they have reached? It succeeds when it makes resentment and approval subside, and it fails when it produces the equanimity of unknowing based on the household life. The note there, that is from Visuddhimagga 9, page 93 to 96. 4 ways of showing favor are: 1. Practicing generosity, dana. Having a generous and liberal attitude of giving, caring, and sharing with others. Feeling of empathy, entertaining and appreciating others' achievements. 2. When communicating with others, use of pleasant, endearing words, which are lovable and worth recording. Piya vachana or payar vacha. 3. Engaging in welfare work, atacharya, helping those who are in need of help and the concern for the well-being of people of all walks of life. 4. Fellow feeling, samana atata, treating others with fairness and equality without any discrimination. The note there from Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Ones, page 26 to page 32, and the Book of Fours, page 219. The practical value of these 4 ways of showing favor for the maintenance of interpersonal relationships has been shown by the Buddha, highlighting the fact how the ruler Hatalevaka has used them to win over a large number of people. Counseling for stress management. The Cambridge psychologist Robert H. Thowless has shown that the Pali word asava is rich in psychological content, and that it covers a wide range of stress-related mental disorders such as depression, aversion, and perversion. He further pointed out that the best English rendering for asava found in early Buddhism is mental stress. The note from Christianity and Buddhism, page 5, by Robert H. Thowless. The plural term from a plus the root sru is to flow, has been rendered into English in many ways. Defilements, cankers, taints, corruptions, influxes, influences, outflows, effluents, mental intoxicants, and mental stress or stress. Accordingly, the term may carry diverse shades of meanings. As Thowless has shown, its meaning can best be understood by the examination of its uses. The note, Pijñanārama, Chapter 13, Stress Management, a Buddhist Technique, Glimpses of Buddhist Wisdom. The text that defines the word states that it is destructive and consuming, vigata, parilaha. Usually, 4 kinds of asava have been differentiated. 1. Stress of sensuous pleasures, kamasava. 2. Stress of becoming, bhavasava. 3. Stress of views, ditthasava. 4. Stress of ignorance, avijjasava. From the Samyutta Nikaya 5, page 236, 340, and the Anguttara Nikaya, page 237. Stress is considered as a common phenomenon in today's society. Environmental factors that condition the lifestyle of contemporary man make him stressed. Certainly, the causes of stress may be varied, but when they are analyzed deeply beyond the later Buddhist scholasticism, most of them can be traced to one of the above 4. Although somewhat overlapping, the impact of stress is recognized on 4 levels. The emotional, behavioral, physiological, and cognitive. A client overwhelmed by depression, sadness, irritation, aversion, and frustration exhibits stress on the emotional level. Poor interpersonal relationships, forgetfulness, lack of attention, and carelessness, and low productivity are behavioral. On the physiological level, he may display tension, headache, backache, stomach ulcers, constipation, and high blood pressure. Cognitively, he loses self-respect, self-confidence, and avoids responsibility, and may go to the extent of committing suicide. Due to numerous reasons, some people feel that they are lonely and alienated. Often, they do not have any clear idea about what they ought to do. In other words, they are not confident enough to make decisions by themselves. Conventional norms and mores no longer give them any sense of hope or direction. Painful feelings of emptiness, isolation, and powerlessness overwhelm them, thereby generating the conditions for stress and strain. The Sarvasava Sutta drafts 7 methods to cope with asava. 1. By seeing them at face value, dasana. Recognition and acceptance of the cause is the initial step of solving the problem. 2. By restraining the 6 avenues of sense, samvara, restraining. Thus, the eye, the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Keeping watch and guard against unwanted external stimuli in order to maintain clear thinking. 3. By using patisevana, what is at one's disposal, with contentment. 4. By enduring adivasana, the unfavorable conditions that are beyond one's control. That is, to adjust the mindset according to the circumstances and face the realities of life with understanding. By avoiding parivajana, the causes of stress in one's way, it is like avoiding a wild elephant, a wild bull, a wild dog, a cesspool, or a sewer, by seeing the impending danger. 6. By removing through reflective reasoning. vinodana, making the mind free from distraction and harmful conceptualization through reflective reasoning. 7. By meditating or culturing mind to be unperturbed, bhavana, with the aid of 7 factors of enlightenment. The note: since many books have been written on both aspects of Buddhist meditation, namely concentration meditation and insight meditation, it will not be dealt with in this study in detail. Subjects of meditation are scattered all over the Buddhist scriptures. Acharya Buddhaghosa has compiled a list of 40 subjects of concentration meditation, Kammatthana, in his Visuddhimagga. 1. 10 devices, or kasina. 2. 10 objects of impurity, asubha. 3. 10 recollection, anusati. 4. 4 noble abodes, brahmavihara. 5. 4 formless spheres, arupa. 6. 1 perception of repulsive nature of food, ahara patikula sanya. And 7. 1 analysis of 4 elements, chatu, dhatu, vavatana. The note: see chapter 5 to see how these subjects are prescribed for those of diverse temperaments. In different contexts, different techniques have been suggested for getting rid of asava. Among them, the development of Eightfold Noble Path and the concentration on breathing in and breathing out are significant. Note from Samyutta Nikaya 5, page 340. Undoubtedly, the teaching of asava management described in the discourse is rich in psychological flavor and therefore can be considered as guidelines for any prospective counselor. It is more real than apparent that in the 7 methods of relieving stress given in the Sabbasava Sutta, awareness or the mindfulness is the underlying basic factor of relieving stress. Ways and means of appeasing psychosis. In many instances, the Buddha has discussed the nature of anger or aversion and the ways and means of appeasing it. Buddhist analysis gives an insight into the interplay of anger with emotional outbursts and suggests how it can be appeased for good. Anger, being one of the 3 roots of evil, take different forms such as aversion, hate, rage, indignation, wrath, irritation, enmity, hostility, revulsion, antipathy, revenge, and grudge. One may conceive a grudge in 9 ways. 1. He has done me an injury. 2. He is doing me an injury. 3. He will do me an injury. 4. He has done an injury to one I love. 5. He is doing an injury to one I love. 6. He will do an injury to one I love. 7. He has bestowed benefit on one I do not like. 8. He is bestowing benefit on one I do not like. 9. He will bestow benefit on one I do not like. Therefore, the Buddha asks one to ponder over the grudge that one may bear towards a person in terms of its positive advantage. But what gain would there be to either of us if I quarrelled about it? The note from Digha Nikaya 3, page 362. When a thought of grudge occurs in the mind, the Buddha instructs one to reflect immediately and work on the grudge with one of the following. 1. Flourish thoughts of loving kindness towards the person. 2. Develop thoughts of compassion. 3. Maintain equanimity in one's mind. Just let it go. Pay no attention and give no thought to the adversary. 4. Consideration of the fact that one is one's own making and that one is heir to one's own karma. The note there from Anguttara Nikaya 3, page 185. Another method of relieving the negative emotion of anger is given in the same text. Anger not only disrupts relationship with others, it is detrimental to one's psychological and physical wellness. The Visuddhimagga illustrates the psychosomatic nature of anger by comparing one's angry conduct with a person throwing burning charcoal or excreta at another. It is illustrated that the person who produces anger first feels the effect of it first. Whether the charcoal or excreta hit the targeted person or not, the hand of the angry person may be burned or defiled first. From Visuddhimagga 1, page 301. Allaying of anger is described by way of taking the different character traits of persons with whom one is prompted to get angry. This is explained by similes. Suppose a person gets angry with a person who has a blameworthy physical conduct, but blameless in verbal conduct. He has to ponder over his blameless verbal conduct and try to allay his anger. This is similar to taking the useful part of a rag and throwing away the worn-out part. Suppose a person gets angry with one who has a foul mouth, but he is blameless in his physical conduct. He has to forget the evil verbal behavior and ponder over his good physical behavior, and thus try to appease anger. This is like one moving aside the moss in a pond with one's hands and drinks the cool water in a pond. Suppose a person gets angry with a person who is evil in both verbal and physical conduct, but displays good qualities from time to time. Then he has to give credit to these rare instances of displaying good dispositions and try to allay his anger. This is compared to drinking water carefully from a small puddle without disturbing its surface. Suppose a person gets angry with another who does not whatsoever. Then he has to appease his anger out of pity for that person, just like a man who has compassionately helped another who is desperately sick in a desolate desert. Suppose a person gets angry with another who is noble and good. Then he has to appreciate the noble and good qualities of the person concerned and dispel his anger. This is similar to a person who drinks, bathes, and enjoys the cool water in an unpolluted lake. The note from Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Threes, page 186 to 190. It is stated that evil emotions like greed, lobha, anger, dosa, revenge, upanaha, contempt, makha, domineering attitude, palasa, envy, issa, avarice, macharya, deceit, maya, fraud, sataya, obstinacy, tamba, presumption, saramba, conceit, mana, arrogance, atimana, vanity, mada, and negligence, pamada, are to be abandoned by following the middle path. The note that is from the Dhammadayada Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 15 to 16. These negative emotions keep one's mind defiled. The note from Vatupama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 36 to 37. Anger and bitterness are both a blemish, and it is stated that an angry person is very difficult to counsel. The notes there from Anangana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 27, and Anumana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 95 to 96. In order to release tension of anger or grudge, some psychologists suggest that an expression to it should be given by means of any verbal or bodily act. But it cannot be considered as a permanent remedy for the psychological crisis that results in anger. The Buddha's approach is aimed at appeasing anger in a most rational and harmless way, and it is quite different from the anger management procedures suggested by some of those psychologists. Anger or aversion is an underlying tendency and may surface in different guises. To manage it effectively, one or a few of the above-mentioned techniques, including concentration, meditation, may be employed by counselors. Understanding the vicissitudes of life. The vicissitudes of life are the worldly conditions, usually categorized as 8. 1. Gain, labha. 2. Loss, alabha. 3. Fame, yasa. 4. Obscurity, ayasa. 5. Blame, ninda. 6. Praise, prasangsa. 7. Happiness, sukha. And 8. Suffering, dukkha. These conditions are not always the same, but keep on changing. The world revolves round them. Since these conditions in the world are impermanent, it is advised that one is to maintain mental poise without being compliant, anurodha, in happiness, or being hostile, virodha, in adversity. The note there, that's from Anguttara Nikaya 4, page 157. When elated, unnata, in prosperity, and depressed, anata, in adversity, one is not able to sustain the equipoise of one's mind. The Buddha continues to point out that since the average folks do not realize these conditions as they really are, they are subject to grief, misery, and tribulation. There are some other Buddhist concepts which are psychologically significant for counseling and connected to one another. Purposive will. In Buddhism, free will is clarified by saying that mind should be restrained by the mind. The quote there, and that quote comes from the Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 120, 121, the Pali. Cetasa cittang abhiniganhitabang abhisantapetabang. And also emphasizing the fact that one should not be under the sway of the mind, but put the mind under one's sway. The note from Majjhima Nikaya 1, page 214. Cittang vasang vatati, na cittasa vasena vatati. Buddhism has given a predominant place to free will in selecting what is most appropriate among alternative actions. Although there is no specific word denoting the concept of free will in Buddhist texts, the concept is conveyed by the words such as atakara, things done by oneself, parakara, things done by another, and purisakara, things done by people. The Buddha has given 6 relative factors that come into operation with purposive willing in his reply to a Brahmin who is denied of free will. Mental components that constitute the act of willing are analyzed minutely and illustrated here sequentially. In other words, psychology of willing is explained psychoanalytically for better understanding of the mechanism of willing. Significantly, there is not any particular reference whatsoever to religious implications in this illustration. 1. The element of willing, arambadhatu. 2. The element of origination, nikama dhatu. 3. The element of endeavor, parakama dhatu. 4. The element of steadiness, tama dhatu. 5. The element of immobility, teti dhatu. 6. The element of volitional effort, upakama dhatu. The Buddha maintained that there are 3 major unorthodox tenets detrimental to one's freedom and proactive efforts for one's well-being. If one thinks that the weal or woe or neutral feeling one experiences is due to the following 3 reasons, one may have no desire to act, nor the effort to act, nor feel the necessity to act, nor does he abstain from any detrimental action. The 3 tenets are: 1. Everything is determined by previous karma. Sabang pubbe kata hetu vada. 2. Everything is due to the creation of a supreme God. Isarani mana nahetu vada. 3. Everything is uncaused and unconditioned. Adicca Samuppanna Vada. The Buddha's argument against these views is forceful. If everything happens one of these ways, some people would have become murderers, thieves, unchaste, liars, slanderers, abusive, babblers, malicious, and hold perverse views due to previous karma or due to a creator god or by accident. Man is just only a puppet, which is a dogma that goes against what is experienced empirically in the world. The lengthy note there, that's from Anguttara Nikaya 1, page 172 to 174, and goes on. In this connection, what William James, 1842 to 1910, the American psychologist and philosopher, has said can be cited. He said that feeling of remorse after performing an action and the expression of regret for not doing it otherwise by some individuals have no meaning had they not the possibility of choosing an alternative action. This proves the fact that there is free will, since an optional course of action could have been perpetrated by them. Similarly, meting out a punishment to an offender is meaningless if he has been predetermined to do that act. Essentials of Buddhism, page 103. The Buddha's attitude to be developed by clients for the elimination of negative mentality comes within the conceptual framework of the theme of the above discussion. The importance of putting forth effort is expressed in emphatic terms, whereas sloth, torpor, and laziness are condemned. A counselor is expected to probe into the mind of his client and excavate the causal genesis of his predicament and energize him to develop positive thinking. Correct effort, sama vayama, energy, virya, and ever-present energy, uttana virya, are always recommended. The notes, Dhammapada 280, 24, 25, and 168. 4 ways of putting forth energy for the elimination of negative thoughts and the development of positive thoughts are described. Page 121. 1. By restraining the mind from negative thoughts that have not yet arisen, samvara. 2. By abandoning the negative thoughts that have already arisen, pahana. 3. By developing positive thoughts that have not yet arisen, bhavana. 4. By sustaining positive thoughts that have already arisen, anurakana. The note, that is from Anguttara Nikaya 2, page 116. So that brings us to the end of chapter 2. Once again, the credit for this great work goes to Jenny Quick. She's put in an enormous amount of excellent research and work compiling this work, and I'm simply reading out and enjoying doing so. It's a great resource. So once again, gratitude to Jenny Quick for all her hard work. And once again, quick disclaimer, I don't make any claims to be qualified health professional or qualified counselor or something like that, or doctor of philosophy. It's simply a very good project to go through in terms of the Pali Canon and in terms of comparing and bridging that, comparing and contrasting it together with modern counseling and psychotherapeutic domain. So let's move on to chapter 3. Thanks very much for going through this work, and I hope many beings can be freed from avoidable suffering.